Welcome to this Forge College Explainer. Seriously, I am thrilled you're here today because we are tackling a really fun piece of the Web3 puzzle. If you've been following along in our Solidity from Zero track, you know we've been deep in the trenches of the events and logging in Solidity course. Well, today, we are finally going to learn how to catch the events you just learned how to throw. That's right, we're bridging the gap from on-chain action directly to off-chain reaction.
It kind of reminds me of that old philosophical question. You know, if a tree falls in a forest and no one is around, does it make a sound? Well, in our previous lesson, Indexing and Filtering Events, we learned how to make our smart contracts absolutely shout from the rooftops by emitting logs on-chain. But let's be totally honest here. That is utterly useless if we don't have a system off-chain actively listening for them. We literally need someone, or rather something, standing in the forest with a really good microphone.
Okay, so here's our agenda. Catching events off-chain, WebSockets versus polling, backfilling data, handling reorgs and duplicates, and validating your listener. Let's just dive right into this builder's blueprint and construct our off-chain event listener step by step.
Starting with Section 1, Catching Blockchain Events Off-Chain.
To completely close this event-driven loop, we need a reliable mechanism that actively subscribes to contract logs and pushes them straight to your application in near real time. The dynamic duo we're using to build this, Node.js and ethers.js. By combining these two, we can build a listener that connects to an Ethereum node, applies those exact topic filters we carefully crafted in the last lesson, and grabs the matching log objects as they happen. It's basically like setting up a highly specific radio receiver that only ever tunes in to your absolute favorite station.
Moving right along to Section 2, Polling versus WebSockets.
We know we need to connect to a node, but how exactly do we ask it for information? Well, we face a pretty distinct trade-off here. Think of polling like those annoying kids in the back seat on a road trip, constantly asking, "Are we there yet? Are we there yet?" You have to keep checking the node on an interval. That means higher latency and, honestly, a lot of wasted effort if nothing has happened. It's simple to set up, but kind of clunky. WebSockets, on the other hand, are like getting a convenient text message the exact millisecond you arrive at your destination. It's a low-latency push model. The node actually taps you on the shoulder and says, "Hey, new event." But WebSockets do require a bit more maintenance, like handling dropped connections.
So, what's a smart Web3 developer to do? Well, you get the best of both worlds, right? Our scaffold is going to prioritize a high-speed, low-latency WebSocket connection. But because the internet is a wild place and connections drop all the time, we're smartly going to fall back to HTTP polling if that socket suddenly disconnects. It's basically a belt and suspenders approach to absolute reliability.
Which brings us to Section 3, Backfilling Historical Event Data.
As I literally just mentioned, connections drop, nodes restart, servers crash, life happens. Your listener will inevitably go offline at some point. And that is exactly why we need a time machine to catch up on what we missed while we were, sleeping. So the crucial point here is that a backfill guarantees you never miss an event that fired while your listener was offline. When your listener boots up or wakes up from a crash, it doesn't just start listening to now. It uses the eth.getLogs function to look back at the blockchain, starting from the last block it remembers seeing all the way up to the present moment.
To execute a backfill correctly, you follow 3 precise steps. First, fetch the logs. Second, and this is a big one, sort them by their block number, and then by their logIndex within that block. And third, process them. Now, why the sorting step? Well, because RPC providers sometimes return historical logs in completely chaotic, out-of-order arrays. By sorting them deterministically before processing, we prevent our application from getting hopelessly confused by a totally scrambled timeline.
Section 4, Handling Reorgs and Duplicates.
We've talked about what happens when we go offline, but what happens when the blockchain itself changes its mind? We absolutely must prepare for the messy, chaotic reality of the blockchain, where blocks can literally shift right under our feet. This shifting is called a chain reorganization, or a reorg for short. It happens when the network resolves a temporary fork, basically dropping a few recent blocks and replacing them with a heavier, longer chain. When this happens, an event that was previously confirmed might be pushed into a totally different block or even broadcasted to you again.
Because a reorg can broadcast the exact same event to your application multiple times, we need a massive, unyielding bouncer at the front door of our application to check IDs. By combining the transaction hash and the logIndex into a single string, like txHash-logIndex, we create a perfectly unique ID for every single event. We keep an in-memory set that tracks this unique key, ruthlessly rejecting any duplicate log that tries to sneak in twice. If an event tries to enter and the bouncer recognizes its ID, no way, it gets tossed right out.
Let's look at our recovery mechanism to see how this builds a truly resilient system. If your WebSocket drops, you don't just furiously try to reconnect every millisecond. You use exponential backoff. Wait 1 second, then 2, then 4, so you don't overwhelm the node. When you do reconnect, the critical second step is to backfill from our last process block minus a conservative window, say 6 blocks. We deliberately look a few blocks into the past just in case a reorg happened while we were completely disconnected. Any duplicates we accidentally pull in will obviously be handled by our bouncer from the previous step. Then, step 3, we safely resubscribe.
Section 5. Validating your listener.
Okay, a blueprint is just theory until we put it to the test, right? So here's the exact checklist to ensure your machine is humming smoothly. You absolutely shouldn't just deploy this and hope for the best. You should execute your listener against a local node and systematically cross off each of these observable signals. Emit an event and ensure it arrives in real time. Start your listener late and ensure it backfills the history correctly. Intentionally throw duplicate events at it to make sure the bouncer actually rejects them. And my personal favorite, literally pull the virtual plug on your connection to watch it gracefully recover and reconnect. Break it on purpose locally so it doesn't break in production.
Through all of this, the absolute golden rule you must adhere to is this: ensure idempotent processing. It's a fancy engineering word for sure, but simply put, remember that reprocessing a log during a backfill or a reorg should never ever corrupt your database or your application state. If your event triggers a counter, ensure that counter only increments exactly once per unique event ID, no matter how many times the listener accidentally processes the log during a chaotic network hiccup.
And finally, Section 6. Summary and next steps. Look at that! We've successfully bridged the gap from on-chain emissions to off-chain reactions. Let's just quickly review the 4 pillars we built today. 1. Choose WebSockets for lightning-fast latency, but definitely keep HTTP polling in your back pocket for backup. 2. Always backfill historical logs sequentially, making sure to sort them so you don't scramble your timeline. 3. Implement a conservative 6-block reorg replay window upon reconnecting. And 4. Deduplicate strictly with those unique transaction hash and logIndex keys. These 4 pillars are the foundation of a robust, crash-recoverable listener that simply won't buckle under blockchain turbulence.
Let's tie this all back to where we started. How you index affects how you subscribe and how you reconcile failures. Event design and off-chain listening are intrinsically linked. The filters you established in your smart contract, deciding what data was indexed and what wasn't back in our last lesson, directly dictate the efficiency, speed, and cost of this Node.js listener we just built. If you index poorly on-chain, your off-chain listener literally has to work twice as hard. So keep that in mind. Thank you so much for joining me on this Forge College Explainer. Don't forget to visit the website, forge.college, to continue mastering this topic and supercharging the rest of your Web3 development journey. Keep building, stay curious, but as you prepare for our next lesson in the track, designing events for monitoring, I want to leave you with this final vital question to ponder. When you are designing your smart contracts, what parameters do your consumers actually need for monitoring?